The ambulance service has a ginormous problem with the fact that their best paramedics are leaving. I don't think it's because they're lazy or weak. I think the problem is much bigger, and that is what we're talking about today. Welcome back to another episode of Paramedic TV. My name's Tommy and this is presented by PocketClinician. So for the last couple of years, I've seen really good clinicians who are amazing on the road. They're really well integrated within the workings of the ambulance station as a team. And, they're people that students and the junior clinicians and even experienced clinicians look up to and say, wow, I want to be like that. And my old crewmate was one of them. They leave. They literally think to themselves, okay, I've had enough and it's time to go. And I think that being on the road is having a bit of a sell-by date of a few years, maybe 3 to 5 years. And it's only, a few people who can actually string it out for 10, 20 years. And I think that there's two types of people in this job. The ones who qualify are going to be here for 2, 3, maybe 5 years before they move on to something else. And the ones who are career paramedics, they're going to stay on the road forever until the day that they retire. But I've even questioned myself, do I think I can stay on the road forever? And the answer is no. And now you've said goodbye. The thing is, you speak to the people who was on the road in the 90s or the early 2000s, and the job just isn't what it used to be. There's no time for a break. There's no time to chat. There's no time to just relax. You're constantly on the go. You feel like you're constantly thinking about all of your KPIs and your on-scene times and your hospital handover times. And yeah, sometimes you feel like that you're having to manage your times more than what you're having to manage the patient. And that is a big issue. So today I will be discussing why the best paramedics end up leaving the ambulance service. I think the first reason is that they care very deeply. They pride themselves on being a really good clinician. When people are coming up to you, asking you questions or saying, what would you do in this situation? It makes you feel like, okay, well, I am a good clinician. But when you do things, sometimes you take it home and you think, right, if I replay that over and over in my head, would I have done anything different? And how can I make myself better? And even though we talk about reflection being a really good way to become better, sometimes reflecting a bit too much can become a bit unhealthy. I've definitely done this before where I take things personally and I shouldn't, but it's just what happens. And I'll give you an example. It was on a cardiac arrest in the street, and the light that one of the management team put down was in my way a little bit, and I moved it behind the monitor. And I didn't realise at the time because I was on the airway, but it actually just caused a massive shadow over the patient. So we had 4 or 5 people all around the patient doing different things, and I had literally just taken their light away from them and then just carried on managing the airway. And within about 2 seconds, everyone was like, "Where's the light gone? Why can't we see anything?" and started moaning about it. And I was like, oh crap, that was my fault. But I was in the middle of suctioning the airway. So it was difficult for me to then move the light again. And then obviously I'd said, I'm really sorry, that was me. Can someone else move the light? And then someone else had to then step back of what they were doing to move the light back into its original place where I'd moved it from. And yeah, I did take that quite personally. I don't think that it's because it inhibited the patient care or anything like that. I think that it's just because I sort of ruined the dynamic of the team a little bit by taking away their vision, essentially. I was fine. I had the light beaming down on this patient's face so I could see everything, but all of the other people who was below that, they couldn't see anything at all. And I think when I said, look, I'm really sorry, that's my fault, I put a lot of blame on myself. In fact, I did. I took all of the blame for it. And yeah, I just took it home and I did feel pretty bad about something that was quite small. Eventually, though, if you do this every shift or every run of shifts, you're just going to exhaust yourself. And I think by caring deeply, sometimes too much, can cause you to think, do you know what? I'm starting to have enough of this. I'm coming home and I'm replaying jobs over and over. I'm feeling guilty about the small mistakes that I've made. And in the end, you are going to reach a point where you feel like you need to move on to something else. Now, no one comes into work one day and says, do you know what, I've decided to leave. It takes years to come to that decision, and it's years of missed meals, missed birthdays, missed Christmases, a sea of difficult jobs that you could just play like a reel over in your head. And just the feeling that the pressure is just building up before you're about to explode. And that, my friends, is burnout. So yeah, burnout doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process, and sometimes you don't even realize that you're becoming burnt out. You just get to a point where you think, I can't cope with this anymore. And you either go off sick for a long period of time and then leave, or you go off sick and then come back, or you just leave. And unfortunately, that's probably the cause of why some good paramedics feel like they need to leave. Now, I'm not going to make this a whole episode on burnout, but I do think that it's important to talk about it just a little bit. We can't control what we attend out on the road. You can spend a run of shifts going to really difficult jobs that are emotionally and mentally draining. And you might have not had a meal break. You might have been late off 4 days in a row, and that really does make you tired. Think about it. You're getting up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. You're not getting home until 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, sometimes even later. And you get home and your partner or your family are saying, hiya, what do you want to do tonight? And you're thinking, I just want to go to bed. I don't even have time for a shower right now. And it's happened to me a lot before where I think I'm so tired, but obviously I've been sweating today. So I have a shower, I skip dinner and go straight to bed, all to wake up at 4:30 in the morning again, have a quick coffee and then head straight into work. And then I get to work and it's only until about 10 o'clock in the morning that I think, wow, the last time I ate was 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon when I had that sausage roll from Greg's or something. And that takes a massive toll on your body and your mind. So it's really important to do your best to look after yourself. If you've done a really difficult run of shifts, just prioritize the things that you need to do to get home and fully nourish yourself and make sure that you're going to try and get the best night's sleep possible. That might include planning meals for the run of shifts or just making sure that you're spending time throughout the shift to go and get some food. I think the topic of food is coming a lot here, which says a lot about me. But, there's lots of things that you can do to try and reduce that level of burnout and generally make you feel happier at work. But yeah, to end, burnout is really common. And unfortunately, even the best paramedics get burnt out. And that's why sometimes I think we see them leave. Next up is that the job does change people and it will change you. You've got to remember that you are a human being like everyone else. And a lot of the time you are seeing people on their worst ever day. You're going to see people on a day that they will remember for the rest of their life, but you've got to do that 6 times a day. It's very peculiar, and I don't think that our minds are geared to be dealing with such a thing. Now, it wouldn't work, would it? You can't just have paramedics that just deal with one patient per week just so that they don't get burnt out or anything. And then that's it. But it doesn't work like that. So there's going to be an element of every single job that will do that to you, in every single job. And it's just an occupational hazard that we need to be aware of and overcome that, which I imagine is why, as ambulance service workers, we get a lot more psychological support than, say, someone who works in a supermarket, because the occupational hazards are a lot different. But by dealing with a lot over that period of time, to then come to work for a meeting with your manager for them to tell you that your times aren't good enough, or you need to be quicker at handing over your patient at a hospital, or all of those things that don't really matter to us because we're paramedics that are there for patients. We aren't there to manage our own times in our head, but obviously it's a job and that's what we're going to need to do. And we join the job to help patients, not sort of help times. But unfortunately, the ambulance service is a business and there are KPIs. And if you're not turning over patients or handing over a hospital quick enough, then people will come down on you. So you have to sort of try and manage that the best that you can. But with all of that involved, you are going to become emotionally fatigued. And, I've definitely changed as a person. I'm a lot more cynical with my humor, with the way that I cope with things. When a relative passes away, I'm not the same as what other people in my family are. because we see death a lot. And so maybe I just contextualize a relative dying differently because it's a process of life that we witness quite a lot at work. So for me, in my head, I think, okay, well, of course it's sad, but, you know, I've sort of understood why they've died in my head. And that is just a perfect example of how the job changes you. You definitely become a lot less patient in your home life. Even myself, you know, I'll come home from work, and if certain things aren't done in a certain way, it does kind of agitate me a bit. And I think it's because I'm in a rush. I'm in a rush to get some food in me, have a shower, and go to sleep because I've got work the next morning. So yeah, just imagine that you've been on the road for 5, 10 years, and you know you've changed, and your family can see it and you can feel it. And then you start questioning to yourself, okay, why am I gonna stay in a career that is changing me? And what you've got to do is this: it changes you badly, but it also changes you in a better ways. Think about this: my train is late, yeah, and I need to get somewhere quickly. Because at work we deal with so many things that happen unexpectedly, when something else happens unexpectedly, you're a lot more geared up to just deal with it. You can think quite logically in your head what you need to do because that's the way that we've been trained. That's what we do. We follow algorithms. We have step-by-step processes in our heads to deal with difficult situations. So when you're running late for your plane, or your train is cancelled, or anything unexpected happens, you're just more geared up to deal with it. And I think that that's quite a cool skill to take from working on the road. Now, there are hundreds of other examples that I could talk about, but that's the way that it changes you for the good. But you know, if the things that you've experienced has changed you for the worse, then you are going to feel like you want to leave the ambulance service. And I think that that is a fundamental reason that contributes towards the really good paramedics feeling like they can leave now. It's a good time to go. I think the other aspect of the job that makes people leave is feeling unsupported. Now, me personally, I'm very lucky. The management team in my workplace, they're really supportive. You know, we get on really well. And overall, I think that their general culture is to support their staff and obviously manage them at the same time. You know, obviously I'm still going to get ridiculed if my times are really bad, but at the same time, I think that they do care about us, and that really helps. But I see stories and I hear stories, and people talk to me about the way that they are unsupported at work. So it's definitely happening out there where management are not supporting their staff. It makes staff feel like a number, or, you know, that they're just a robot doing a job that they need to do and come back to the ambulance station and then go home. Bearing in mind, sometimes a day can be really difficult. And if you don't get any appreciation from that, then you're going to come back to the ambulance station at the end of your shift and think, why am I doing this? It's not like we get paid loads of money. I mean, don't get me wrong, the salary isn't awful, but for what we do, I do genuinely think that paramedics should be getting paid a little bit more. And I'm not going to go too much into that before people start battling me on the comments, but it's something that I think, and that's my justified opinion. The thing is, I've got friends who work in the corporate field, and they might be marketing managers or sales assistants, and you know, they do something well at work and they get either a ginormous bonus, they get an award, they get a certificate, they get like put up on stage, or their picture gets put up on the board to say this is our star employee of the month. In the ambulance service, you don't really have that. You just do a really good job and then move on to the next one. And I find that it's only when you make a mistake or do something bad that it gets picked up on. And I think that that's just the nature and the culture of the ambulance service, because we do so many good things and we bring so many nice things to people's lives that, you know, most paramedics probably would have a sea of trophies and certificates. If you did get a certificate for every good thing or really good thing that you did, then yeah, you would have a living room full of trophies. So, you know, obviously you can't appreciate everything, but you know, I'm not going to ignore the fact that there is a lack of appreciation and support within the ambulance service, and that is something that will make good paramedics want to leave in the end. Lastly is career progression. Now, working on the road, you'll get to a point, most of the time a paramedic, and there won't really be anywhere else to go. Now, personally for me, I work on a flexible working policy where I book my own shifts because I've got a family and I run a business, and it just works well for me. But I think that if I wanted to progress in my career, like become a manager or join the hazardous area response team or become, an operational manager out on the road somewhere, I think that it would be very difficult for me to do that purely because of my flexible working pattern. And I know that, my work would support me in doing that, but I think that it still would restrict me a lot in my home life. And so what you find is people leaving because, I did find a job in a custody suite, for example. It was band 6 or band 7. It was part-time. You can do your own hours. And I thought, you know what? And I did think about it, and I thought, you know what? It might be nice to reduce my hours on the road and work in like a custody suite half the time and on the road the other half, because it changes it up a little bit. And I think that's what we're looking for. After a few years, you do get to a point where you think, okay, well, yeah, we see different people every day, but the job doesn't change much. We see a lot of low acuity presentations these days, and it can feel a little bit samey. And as much as you can't think to yourself, oh, this is boring, this is rubbish, because it isn't. You're caring for patients who are unwell. It does sometimes get to a point where you think, wow, I haven't felt my adrenaline spike, or I haven't, felt like I needed to work really quickly, because ultimately that's what we're searching for. And that's why we joined the job, right? To work really quickly under pressure and help critically unwell people, until we then qualified and realized that actually that's not 100% of the job, which is fine, but that will cause an element of, burnout, I suppose. Going back to career progression though, I really considered it. I didn't do it in the end, but I really did consider working half and half in a custody suite and out on the road. But I've looked at jobs before. I've had times, sort of low times in my career, where I've thought, okay, I could work in a hospice now. They're employing hospice paramedics, or in a GP surgery. And I think that is when you can then take on your progression a bit more. You can specialize in something. You can become a prescriber. You can become an advanced practitioner. All of these things that take you off of the road and into something else. And I was working with a great paramedic. She was really good, really down to earth. We had such a good shift together. She does maybe 1 shift or 2 shifts a month on the road, but she actually works in a minor injuries unit full time. And I was thinking, yeah, so she's been taken off the road because of career progression, and she wanted to go into minor injuries, which is completely fair enough. But I think sometimes it's not a bad thing to want to progress further, just not on the road. And, I'm not trying to push people off the road or anything like that. But, I don't think I'm wrong in saying that for a lot of people, the road does have a sell-by date, and that sell-by date will change depending on the person. But, there's going to be an element of good paramedics leaving purely because they want to progress into a specialist field that the road can't offer them. So yeah, those are the things that I can think of as to why really good paramedics end up leaving the ambulance service. It's a big problem, and I think staff retention is something that is getting better within the ambulance service, but we are still seeing good paramedics go. And it's either time for someone to say, how do we fix this, or how do we accept this? And I don't really know which one to choose. Like I say every video, if you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and also pop a comment. It can be a question, it can be something that you agree or disagree with. I really don't mind. Either way, I've been Tommy, and this is Paramedic TV. Until next time.